Is Bega Tinna? Bega Tinna and then
Start on.
Hi, mommy. What up, big fella? How long is the class? It's an hour.
All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining in today. So today's our Java class. Last week we went through loops and arrays and how to do that. So in the beginning of class today, I'll quickly review that. Not quickly, I'll go in a little bit because it's a confusing concept. We'll spend the first part of class on that. And then we'll go into more about how to create our own class and stuff like that. So I'll share my screen. All right. So can everyone see my screen just to confirm? So let's see, we have a question. So this question is kind of regarding what we're going to look through in class today. So next couple of weeks, we'll go through on how to create multiple classes and everything. So don't worry about that right now. We'll go through it right now. So just to start off, so I have my class 5 file that I created here. If you guys can also create 2 files called student.java and studenttester.java. So you guys aren't struggling to create that later in class when we use it. So just so you guys know, I'll put all the names in the chat, but just create these files for class today if you want to follow along. So those are the 3 file names. So then one more thing, make sure to check out all the information here on the GitHub link that has homework solutions and class notes, and then also the tiny URL with the recordings. So those 2 links are helpful. So now we'll go in to class. So remember last class we worked with the scanner, which is what we use to get input from the user or whoever's using our program. And you want to use this import statement up here to specifically grab that scanners class. We also have the arrays, which we'll get into in a little bit. But right now what we're going to focus on is importing the scanner class. So I'll create another create a variable as we've been doing this. So we have a scanner variable from the scanner class that's named scan, and we take in the system.in so that our scanner variable is able to take input from the user. And then I'll do the example that we had last class. So here I said enter a minimum. I'll just go like that. And we say int min is equal to scan.nextInt. So remember that when we take this next int, we're able to take whatever the user inputs as an integer, and we're able to assign that to this variable min. You can do the same thing for a maximum value. For your semicolons, and I say int max is equal to the next integer that the user will input. So I'll quickly just run this. So nothing will get printed out when I run this other than the prompts to enter the numbers. But so if I run this, enter minimum, let's say it's 12, enter maximum. So if I were to mistype or something, let's say I accidentally put an A and then I do 15, then it's going to give me an error because it's not right. So you want to make sure that since it's a next int, you want to make sure that you're only inputting numbers like that. For example, if I were to also put in an integer like that, or a double like that, then it'll give me a mismatch exception like that. So you always want to make sure that whatever you're saying that you're reading from the user that's similar to what you're going to input. So you want to always make sure that you input integers. Let me fix this real quick. Okay.
And wait, when you're saying int, min, and max, are you meaning like the function?
Oh no, so these are just the name of my variables. This can be anything. I can name it after myself. It can be anything. These are just variable names that we've been doing.
Scan.nextInt means what does that mean?
So what we're doing here is we print out enter a minimum. Then the user, when you type this line scan.nextInt, the Java program is basically waiting for you to input something, or the user to input something. So like, you know how when we run this, then you see like the program stops here, it says enter minimum. So it's waiting for me to input. And then once I enter that number, then the min value gets assigned to that value 12, the variable min. And then same thing for max. The value max will get assigned to the value 15 or whatever I input.
Okay.
So yeah, and then so last class we went through for loops. So remember in a for loop, we have our variable that we use, and then we do separate it by a semicolon, then we have our condition, and then we have like an increment or a decrement. This is not code, sorry, this is just a comment. And then we have this, and you tab over, and we have all of our code, and then you close it, obviously. Oops, yeah. So this is what a for loop kind of looks like. So now if I were to create one using these min and max values, so I can say, actually, I'll start off with the simple one first. So we have int I is equal to 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus, system.out.print I. So this will print so this will print the value of I through this iteration through the for loop. So it starts at the value of 0, then we increment it by 1 using this part of the code, and then it will keep incrementing the value of I by 1 until it reaches the value of 5. So it won't include that 5. If I wanted to include that 5, I can do less than or equal to like that. But since I'm just doing a less than, it will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now if I were to run this, I can do this quickly, but yeah. So now you see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's just a simple for loop. So now if I wanted to use the min and max, I can say my integer I is equal to the min. So whatever the user specifies as the minimum is what I start at. Then I can go all the way up to the max, including that max. So I include the less than or equals to. And then I can do I plus plus, or I can do, for this example, I'll do an I plus equals 2. So what that basically means is it'll increment I by 2 every time it iterates through the for loop, every time it goes through that for loop. So now I can just print out I again. Yeah, so then now if you were to run this, I'll start at, we'll go 10 to 100. So what this will do is I will begin at the value of 10 and increment all the way up to 100, including 100 by values of 2. So we'll get like, you see, we go to the start, we have 10, 12, 14, 16, all the way down to 100. So now, since it's a plus equals 2, and if I were to not include that equals, so I remove that equals here, then you can see that this, if I do the same numbers, it'll only go up to 98. So I won't include that 100, and then obviously there's no 99 because you're incrementing by 2. So these are just simple ways that you can use a for loop.
And what does I plus plus mean?
I plus plus, oh yeah. Last class we covered this. So I plus plus, is equal to I plus equals 1, which is equal to I. All right, this is kind of confusing here. I'll make it a little bit clearer. So all three of these are the same statement, basically just incrementing by 1. So with this statement, you can only increment by 1. But with these two statements, I can change it up how I'm changing it here. So I'm incrementing by 2. I can also increment by 5. So if we were to run that, then I'll do same numbers. You get 10, 15, 20. So incrementing by 5 all the way to 100. So just like that. So that was the for loop. We quickly went through while loops last time, if you guys can remember. So I'll do another quick example similar to what we did last class. So I just have a counter variable and I say while this counter variable is less than 10, then I want to print out that variable. Oops. And remember that if I do this, then So I'll run it actually just to show you guys. So if in this while loop, if I say while count is less than 0, print out count, this loop will execute forever because I'm never modifying the value of our variable count. As you can see here, it will just forever print zeros. So it takes up a lot of your command line. So, and that causes like programs to crash or timeout or stuff like that. So you always want to make sure that you have something that will terminate the while loop. So for example, since it's less than 10, if I can increment by, we'll say 2 actually. I'll do 1. I'll just do 1 for now. So this will start the value of count at 0, print out count, and then it'll increment and then execute the while loop again. So we'll start at 0, then it goes to 1, then it goes to 2, then it goes to 3, and so on. So now if we see the output, then you can do it like that. So then you see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then similar to how we did less than or equals to in the for loop, you can do it into a while loop. And then we get 0 to 10. So yeah, those are just simple ways. Oh yes, I didn't show you guys how to stop your code. So if you were running that, if you ran that, I'll run it for you guys. So it's like constantly printing zeros. You can do a Control C, which will stop your code, and it'll go like that. So Control C is the way. Just type that in the chat so you guys can all see. Control C. But yeah, so for a while loop, you always want to make sure that you have a increment or a decrement. So you can also do it the other way. Start at 10, go all the way to 0, and then minus equals 1. So it'll lower the value of count, and I can run that. Oh. One second. Oh, I see. So my problem here is I forgot to change. So the reason nothing was running was I have count is less than or equal to 0 here. And since I started count at 10, it's never going to execute that while loop, so nothing gets executed, which is why I was getting this problem here. So you can see nothing is getting executed every time I run this file. So I forgot, what I did was I forgot to change the condition in my while loop. So if you ever see a problem like that, you can change your condition. So count is greater than or equal to 0, and then you lower it by 1. And then now when I run it, it'll run 10 through 0. So yeah, that was just a small bug on my part. Yeah, so those are while loops. And then we also went through arrays. So I'll start with, start with an array like that. And then you can define an array and include random elements. That. So this would be an array with 4 different values. So an array is basically just a list of values. So in this case, this list has the values 2, 5, 1, and 10. And then remember that if I want to print out an array, I can't use this function. I can't use just print ln r, because you remember what that does. It'll print out this hex code value, hash code or whatever, which is basically what Java uses to reference that array. So it's irrelevant to us for the programmer. So what you can do is import this arrays, write that in the chat. Import this arrays, which will allow us to print, if you guys recall from last class. And then once we run that, then you can see we have like a nice list like that. So as you guys can notice, when I create my array, it's using these curly braces like that. But in the output, it'll have these square brackets. So the square brackets are really what you're going to use when you're modifying an array. So for example, I showed you guys last class to modify. So the 0 with index would be the first element. You remember indexes start from, so if we're counting this out, we'll go 0 is that index, 1 is that, 2 and 3. So array index counting starts at 0. So I can basically change the value at index 0. Let's say I want this to equal to 50. Then I can print out this array. And you see I get 2, and then it changes the value to 50. So that would be a way to change change arrays. Then I'll use the same example from last class with the cars. So if you have these 4 different types of cars, this is just it's another way to define an array, but instead of being an integer array, this is a string array, so it only contains strings. So like if I were to try to add like 10 here and run this, then I'll get an error, compilation failed, because int cannot be converted to string. So whatever you define this as string, you want to make sure that your types inside your array stay consistent, so that you don't have integers or doubles in an array, in a string array, or vice versa with a string inside of an integer array. So I always want to make sure that stays consistent. Because so as we went through for loops like this, there's another type of for loop which is called a for each loop. So what this basically does is allows you to so when we're going through an array like this, I'll show an example. So here we have an int array, so I can say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than the length, the total number of values in my array, and then I plus plus. So remember, this is how we can access the total number of elements in an array. Here, I'll slow down because some people are having some problems. So yeah, if you're having problems with compiling, just make sure that your class name and your file name are the same. And then also when you're in terminal, if you type ls, you should see that name of your file, whatever you're trying to work on, in that specific directory. So if you don't see that, then you're probably in the wrong directory. So try to navigate using the cd command.
Excuse me?
Yeah, so going back to this, so remember array.length is the total number of elements in this array. So if I wanted to print out each value of this array, I can say print array I. So what this does is it will take, so I starts at 0, obviously, and then it'll print out array 0, and then it will keep going all the way up until it gets array.length. So in this case, array.length is equal to 4. But since the last element is at index 3, you want to go until that value 4 and not actually include that value 4, as we went through last class, because if you include that value 4, you can run into index errors, index out of bounds errors, which we saw. So I can run this. And then we get each individual value from this array. So remember, I commented out this where I changed it to 50, so we're still using these values. But yeah, so it'll print out each value individually. So I'll just demonstrate that quickly. If I were to include that less than or equals to, then I'm going to get an index out of bounds exception, because there's no value in my array at index 4, if that makes sense. Yeah. So now that's how we can access different elements of an array. So that's kind of hard because you have to find the array length and everything and go through that. So a pretty simple way to go through arrays is I can just say string car in my cars. So the same way that we create like a temporary integer value, int I is equal to 0, we create a temporary car, for example. So this would be a string car. So this variable is what we can only use this variable inside of our for loop, the same way that we can only use this variable in my for loop here. So this variable string car will represent, each time that I go through the for loop, it'll represent that value wherever it is in the array. So the first time it goes through, it'll be at Volvo. The second time it'll be at BMW. The third time it'll be at Ford. Fourth time it'll be at Mazda. So I can just print that out. And then, oops. And I print that out, then we see individually it's like that. So this is just another way to use for loops to go through arrays. Sometimes these can be convenient when you're just trying to find different values of an array or modify them if you like modify a certain value. So we'll get into more examples on when to use these, but this is just another type of for loop that is pretty common in Java. And it's pretty useful. Yeah, so are there any questions on that, on for each loops or for loops or while loops or arrays or anything? Okay. You didn't get for each loop. Okay. So this cars is basically, this is just another way to define a for loop. So the string car represents a single string in that entire array of cars, while this cars is referencing this value that we created here. So basically when you use this colon, it's basically saying, I want to grab whatever value out of this cars array. So then obviously the first time that you execute, it'll grab the first value in the array. The second time that you execute the for loop, it will execute, it will find the second value in the array. So as you can see, first time it prints out Volvo, the second time it prints out BMW, Ford, and then Mazda. So basically this string car will just represent a single value in that array, and it'll be different every time. So I have a question. So maybe this is kind of confusing. So basically this value car is what I named my temporary string that I'm using to access each element. So this can be named anything. This can be named A. If I print out A, it'll be the exact same thing. Because this is basically just creating a temporary string to be able to access each one of these elements. So cars is my overall array that I'm looking through. And then this string that I defined here is what I'm going to say is each individual value of that array. And it will print in the exact same order that you define in your array. So we can do the same thing here. So we have our integer array there. And I say for integer. So I'll show you guys here. We have another integer A. And then I can say system.out.println A. So basically, since string A can only be used in this for loop, I can create another variable of the name A in this for loop. Because after this for loop is done executing, that string A variable is basically wiped away from memory. So now I can create a new variable here, and then I can print that, and you see I get 2, 5, 1, 10, which is the same order that we defined it here. So these are just simple ways to like loop through a for loop. So do for each loops make a little bit more sense now?
Wait, so what is a for int?
So for int, so as you can see, an array here it's an array of integers. And then if I were to use this for each loop, then I could create a temporary integer named A to access each individual element, the same way that I'm doing with cars. Since this is a string, I specify this as a string. And then since this is an integer, I specify this as an integer.
And we can always do for string cars, right? And for int car array.
Yeah. This can be named anything. I can just like name
Yeah.
it like that, and then like that, and then this can be like car. Yeah, obviously this is what we did. This can be car if you want, like anything. As long as these two, whatever you're like, if you're trying to print out each element in this case, then as long as this value matches that value, then yeah, then you're gonna be fine. Because if I were to try to do this is basically executing. So this is kind of confusing. So this is for integer. I'll name this A again. So for an integer in my array, I'm going to print out the entire array. So that will just print out that like nasty this thing each time that I execute the array. So like if you're trying to print out the values in that array, then you want to make sure that it's whatever you specify in your for each loop.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and also one more thing.
Mhm.
So for last week's code, I copied it all down correctly, and I ran it in REPL.it, but it didn't recognize the classes at all.
The classes.
Yeah.
It could be a problem with like because so also if you were to copy like all of my code from what I do in class to like on REPL or something, there might be some issues because like I use like same variable names here and there. So
No,
there
I
might be,
just use I use another compiler text editor to write it, but then I just use REPL to compile it because all I had on my computer was a Python compiler, but still it didn't work.
Okay, yeah, just send me your errors after class. We'll try to work through that, but yeah, as long as you're understanding what I'm saying, typing in class, then that's basically all you really need.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll create another array. Quickly go through a little bit more on arrays. So we've been creating these arrays like this. So for example, I'm creating an array here and I'm defining each individual element that I want in my array. But sometimes when you're creating an array, you don't really know exactly what values that you want in the array while you're executing your program. So one thing that you can do is if I create another array like this, sorry, I forgot an array, so like that. So remember for an array, quickly, you can either put the double brackets here or you can put them here. It's the same thing. There's no difference. It's just like a style preference. So I personally like to have them here, but it's whatever your choice is. So then I create an array, and then I say new integer of 4. So what this basically does is it creates an integer array, and then I'm saying I want to create a new integer array with 4 elements inside of it. So this defines that my array has to have 4 elements inside of it, and is an integer array. That's going to be completely empty. So now if I were to print out this array, you can see that it prints me an empty array of all zeros. So if whenever you create this, an array like this, then it will just create an array with how many ever elements you specify. So in this case, I specified 4 elements, and it will just create an empty array of all zeros. So now what I can do is I can change the values. So I say, if I want to say int I is equal to 0, and since we have 4, I'll say I is less than my array.length. So that's my array.length would represent 4. Then I increment by 1. Then I can say my array I is equal to I. So what this is saying is I create a for loop with creating a temporary integer I, and I say that I can only go as far as the total length of my array, and I increment I by 1 every time. So this I can kind of represent each individual index in my array as well. So the first time I is the 0th index, obviously, and I assign that to the value of 0. Then the second time it goes, so I'll actually write this out. So first time it executes my array 0 will equal to 0 because I is the value of 0. Second time it execute, my array 1 will equal to 1. And then my array 2 will equal to 2. My array, 3 will equal to 3. And then since
Wait, just making sure. So the bracket I means index, right? So the array of my array, no, the index of my array is equal to I.
Yeah, the index of whatever value, whatever the value of I is. So in the first time, value of I is 0. So I'm accessing the 0th index of that array. And I'm changing that value to 0. Well, in this case, it's already 0, but I'm just going to say it's 0. And then the first index is the value of 1. And then since this will go all the way up until the length of the array, which is 4, it won't execute my array 4 because it'll only go until 3. So then now, after the for loop, if I were to print out my array, we can see the difference. Starts at 0, 0, 0, and then it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. So you can see how you can kind of manipulate arrays in that way and change the values like that. So another, a different way that you can kind of do that is that, let's say I don't want to keep my values the same as whatever index is at. So like you see how the 0th index is 0, the first index is 1, the second index is 2. If I want to change that, I can just create like a sort of like a temporary variable. So I want to say this is my counter, and I'll start that out at 1. And then I can say, so I can make I represent my indexes now. So I will represent each index in my array, and it'll continue to execute until I reach the end of my array. And then I can say my array I is equal to count. And then I can increment count by 10, let's say. So each time it executes, it's counter. Yeah, the name of my variable is counter. So my array I will equal to counter, and then each time that I execute counter, I'll increment it by 10. If my array length has an error, so yeah, just make sure length has no parentheses on it and it's spelled correctly. And then also, if you guys are trying to do it with parentheses like that, remember the dot length with parentheses is only used for strings, not for arrays. So with an array, you want to use no parentheses. But yeah, so now going into this example. So the first time I execute, I'll have my array 0, that'll equal to 1, because the value of counter when I first execute my array is 1. And then I say counter, so after that execution, counter will plus equal 10, meaning I'm adding 10 to the value of counter, so that counter will equal 11. So then next time I run it, my array 1 will equal to 11, and then I add 10 to counter again, and that'll equal to 21. And then like so on like that. So, and then as you can see, when we run it now, we get 0, 0, 0, and I get 1, 11, 21, 31. So this is incrementing it by 10 through each value in the array.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
So essentially, the very first time when you're saying my array index I equals counter, it's printing out 1. And then after that, it keeps doing 10 until we reach the like 4 times, until we like basically reach the loop, which is 4
Yeah,
times
exactly.
printed. So why is it printing out 1 first?
Oh, that's because I assigned the value of counter to 1 initially. So I can assign this to 10, for example. And then now
And
if
then
I
it
were
would
to run
start
it,
at 10, and then it would go 10, 20, 30, correct?
yeah, exactly, just like this.
All right, I see.
Wait, so counter plus equals 10 increases the value of counter?
Yeah, it'll each time it executes the for loop, it'll increase the value of counter by 10.
And how are you exactly printing this out? Because there's no.
Using
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's a cool way to just create arrays and manipulate the values however you want.
And is the
What is-
variable counter like a specific term?
No, this is just a variable I created. Again, this can be any name you want. So I do like that. I'll do the same thing.
And also, what is arrays.toString? What is the function of that?
That's
Oh, yeah,
the
so
class they're using to make the things neater.
I see.
Yeah. So toString is just a method in the arrays class. So toString is something we'll get into in the next couple of weeks. It's a pretty common method in Java, but this just allows us to see like a pretty version, I guess, of that array.
So counter is 10, so then it's basically 10 plus 10.
Yeah, so then each time you execute counter, or you execute the for loop, it'll start at 10, they'll go to 20, and then you add 10 to 20, you get 30, like so on. So like if I were to make this 10, like of size 10, this array, then I can run this, and then you guys see it starts at all zeros, and it goes 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way to 100. Does this all make sense?
Excuse me, just one more question.
Yeah.
So you're doing the system.out.println 2 times. So the second time it's understood that it goes 10, 20, 30, etc. 10 times. But the very first time when you're doing it and you're saying arrays to string my array, then is it basically like just printing out all of the zeros because we don't have any other counters there?
Yeah, so the reason that all those zeros, so as you can see, I created an array using this line. So this is basically just creating an array of 10 values. And when you first create that array, Java defaults it to creating an array of 10 values, and all of those values are 0. So
Because
then what
you're
I'm
not
doing through
defining
the
it.
for loop is basically manipulating each of those values.
I see.
Wait, what does the first line mean? So how do they change from like 1 or 11, 21, 31, 41?
Oh yeah,
to
sorry.
10,
I'll remove these again. Because you remember when I was doing the example with starting at 1?
Yeah.
So then that's when it was doing, so this should be counter is equal to 20, 30. Yeah, because it starts at 10. Yeah.
Wait, what
exactly
did
what
you
they're
change again?
saying. So
What do you change again?
I just remember I made counter equal to 10 and then I incremented it by 10. Initially I had it at 1.
Yeah.
That's when I was showing the example down here. But yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, all you guys basically need to know is that when I first create this in an array like this is what this is what I'm kind of trying to show, is that this is just going to be a bunch of values of 0. That's what Java will default it to. And then through this for loop and all this counter variable and stuff like that, I'm able to manipulate the values to whatever I want. So you can play with that and try to change the values to whatever you want.
So before you put in counter, it'll have like 0, 0, 0, 0.
Yeah, exactly. Just how I'm showing right here.
How come
Before
it
you
has
do
that
that.
so many times? Oh, 10
Because
times.
it's because you're doing it 10 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, at first it was 4, so I got kind of confused.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I changed that too. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a pretty good example. So now, so let's say you're creating a program. Let's say you're at work at a shoe store, and all of your customers have, all right, this is not a very good example, but let's just say you have a bunch of shoe sizes and you're trying to find the biggest shoe size out of all your employees at your shoe store. So then if I have an array, so I create an array of doubles, which can represent different shoe sizes. Then I can, so in this case, I'll just say, I'll just define it right now with specific shoe sizes. So we're not going to use that same example, but this is how I can create shoe sizes. We have this. So for example, if I have 5 different employees in my shoe store, and these are the different sizes that they have, then I can create so now if I want to look through
You
that
just
for
now
loop,
created a string called double shoe size?
No, this is an array of doubles.
Oh, so don't you need a list array somewhere? Or is it automatically inferred from the brackets?
Yeah, so the shoe size, so I've been naming it like my array or cars or whatever. So shoe size is just the name of my array. And then double with these brackets is basically just creating an array of doubles or like decimals. So then in this case, so I'll create, let's say, int array length is equal to shoe size dot length. So that's how I can kind of save the total number of values in my array into a variable. And then I can say for integer I is equal to 0, same thing that we've been doing, I plus plus. So this allows me, I represents the index of my array, so I can access individual values of that array. And then I want to find the max shoe size. So how can I find the max shoe size of this array? So one thing that I can do is create a temporary value called max size. And since in this case we know all the values are going to be greater than 0, I assign my max size to 0. So when I'm looking through my array, basically what I want to do is check each individual value of this array and then see whether that is greater than my current max size, which represents the maximum shoe size in my list. So what I can do here is I can say if shoe size I is greater than my max size. Basically, you're saying every time you execute this for loop, I'm saying, is my shoe size greater than my max size? If it is, I want to say my max size is equal to this shoe size. Whatever shoe size it found was greater than my max size. And then at the very end of my for loop, I'll just print out max size. So if you guys are unclear about exactly how this is working, I'll just demonstrate it to show you. So in this case, type in the chat what would be the max shoe size. What would you expect this program to print out? Yeah, 13. So then now if I were to run this, I get 13. So it's going to print out 13.0 because it's a double. But yeah, it's 13, so it's the same thing. So if you guys can kind of understand this, basically I have a condition in here and that says that whatever shoe size I'm at, so if the first time, so I'll kind of show how this works. So the first time that I execute it, I have shoe size 0. So that is equal to 8.5. And then I check, is 8.5 greater than 0.0? Yes, it is. I'll say yes. So then now I say max size is equal to 8.5. So this would be the first iteration of the for loop. Now the second time, I'm at the first index, right? So because I started at 0, so now I is equal to 1. So in this case, if I look in my array, the value is 12. So then now I check again. I check, is shoe size 1 greater than max size? So right now we see max size is 8.5 and shoe size 1 is 12. So in this case, 12 is greater than 8.5. So yes, so then max size is equal to 12. Third iteration, we see shoe size 2 now, and we're at 9. So then now I'm in this if statement, is shoe size at index 2 greater than the max size? So is 9 greater than 12? And since that's a no, this basically will ignore whatever is inside the if statement and go to the fourth iteration of the for loop now. So the fourth iteration, then we have shoe size 3, which is equal to 10.5. And it's 10.5. And since we didn't manipulate the value of max size here, we still have the max size equaling 12. So then it is 10.5 greater than 12? No. So then we skip over to the fifth iteration, which is the last iteration in this case. And then that's shoe size 4, which is equal to 13. Then I say, is 13 greater than 12? Yes. So then now max size is equal to 13. And then we printed that out and we got 13. So if you guys see how I kind of like typed out different iterations like this, obviously this is easy to do when you have like a pretty small array like this of just 5 elements. So sometimes if you have problems either with your homework or something like that, or whenever you're coding in the future, if you have problems with the for loop, sometimes it's pretty nice to just kind of walk through your for loop if and see like what's happening in my for loop. What are the values of all my different variables in my for loops? How can I change this to make it work? So in this case, like for example, if I were to say less than, then if by mistake I typed less than, then I run it, it'll obviously print out 0.0 because none of these are less than max size. Then if I walk through it, I can kind of see like, oh yeah, I actually have a less than rather than a greater than. So then I want to make sure that this is a greater than, so that when I print it, I get the correct output. So as you guys can see, like the computer is able to execute all these different iterations, like basically in the matter of like a snap. Like it can do it really quickly, all this work. What was the scenario again? So this was just like if I have shoe sizes I'm comparing with like my employees at a shoe store or whatever, then I'm trying to figure out who has the biggest shoe size. So this is just like a program to do that. This would be if you're given the shoe sizes, yeah. Yeah, so that's a cool way to use for loops. So I showed you guys for each loops earlier. So obviously I'm using the original version of a for loop that we learned. So I'll just do this quickly. You guys can look at this more after class if you're interested, but I'm gonna do this using a for each loop. So I'm gonna just create a double. So remember, since I have an array of doubles, I will create a double size like that to access that. And then I want to say, I want to access each element in my array shoe size. And then I say if my, so I'll just create another one, double max shoe. So this is just another max one I'm creating. So these are separate, so these have no relation. And I'll say if the size is greater than max shoe, then I want to say max shoe is equal to size. And then, so what is it? Max shoe. I'll comment out this print statement for now. Or I'll keep them both. And then now you can see that it prints out 13.0 both times. Can I oh, do you mean these links? Oh. Okay, I see we're almost running out of time, so I'm gonna try to get into classes. So, if you guys want me to review loops at the end, I'll quickly do that, but I'm gonna try to get into classes. So throughout this course so far, every time we create a class, I've been telling you guys to type all this right here to start your class. So in this case, we're not actually going to use this, but I'm going to go through and briefly explain to you guys what each of these terms sort of mean. So as you guys see, we've been typing this word public a lot. So public class student, public static void main. So public basically represents something that can be accessed by anyone. So if I'm working in another class, so like for example, this class, I should be able to access this main method, or I should be able to access the entire class student. So public allows me to access it from any other place in my other files or programs or whatever. But if I were to keep this private, this won't be able to be accessed by anyone, which is not what we want for this case, but yeah. Then this word static. Static is a very complex term in computer science and Java. What it basically allows you to, it makes this method related to the class so that I don't have to create a whole student object to be able to access these methods, but rather I can individually access these methods through another class. So this is like sort of like a pretty broad topic that I'm not going to get into too much depth about right now. But like what you guys need to understand is that these static variables basically allow you don't need to like create an object for this class to access those different values or change those different values. So void here, void basically means that nothing will really be returned through my method. So we'll get into more in like the next couple of minutes on void. I'll show you examples of that. And then main is just like the name of my method. So in this case, Java wants you to always name your main method main, so that is able to identify where you're running the majority of your code. And then the string bracket args. So I'll quickly actually show a demonstration on the string args. So this allows you, when you're running your Java file through the command line, you can actually access each one of those values individually. So I'm going to use another for each loop. So since we have an array of strings called args here, I want to access a single element of that, and I want to print out that element. So if you guys don't know what an argument is in command line, I'll quickly show that right now. So right now when I run my Java file, I just have these two, Java and then the name of my file, and then I can execute. Oh, in this case, we're running student.java. So remember, I'm running student, so student.java. I run it, nothing happens. So right now I'm passing no arguments to the command line. But now if I were to say, these are arguments. So each word after my file name is sort of split by a space. I have a space in the middle of each of these. These are arguments. Then when I run this, I will use these are arguments. It'll be able to print out. So basically anything that you print after these separated by a space, these are all put into an array. So when I run this, the string args array is basically representing like this. These are arguments. So that's what the array would look like. So you guys obviously don't need to worry a lot about all this, but like I feel like I haven't really gave a clear explanation on what exactly this main function is doing. So that's kind of what all of these words and key identifiers are used for. But yeah.
So string args means what again?
There basically is an array of all the arguments that I pass. So in this case, anything separated after the file name, this will go into an array. So I'll print out each one of those arguments individually. You see, I went through here. Did a for each loop, and then I printed out each word like that.
And that's what all of string bracket args means?
Yeah, it's just an array of the arguments that I pass.
Then how come there's a string?
Sorry, what?
Then how come it's a string in the array?
Oh, because it's an array of strings. So anything that I pass will be taken as a string, whether it's like, whether it's like a number, like anything like that, it'll still print out each one of those like that. Everything will be taken as a string. So I'm not going to go into much depth about this. We have a little bit more to go through, but yeah. Okay. So now I'll create. Would everyone like me to do a review on the loops, or would you guys want to go into new information right now for the last 10 minutes?
Review.
New.
Review. Okay. Okay. Can I review stat again? Yeah. So I'll do a review of everything. I won't do that actually. Okay, yeah, so again, a scanner is kind of what we used to get input from the user. We went through this last class. And then we said I entered a minimum, we got the minimum number, I entered the maximum, we got the maximum number. Oh, I'll just comment this out. And then we use those numbers to print the values in our for loop. So this was a pretty simple example that most of you guys should be comfortable with now. Oh yeah. So we go 1 to 100. Oh, I incremented it by 5. I incremented it by 5 each time. So it starts at 1. Obviously, we'll go to 6, and then it'll keep going until it reaches 100. In this case, if it were to increment 5 after 96, that would overtake 100, so it won't print out 101. Yeah, and then we did while loops really quickly. We'll get into while loops more next week and the week after. But this was just a simple way to print numbers from 10, lower them by 1. So remember, with while loops, you always want to have some sort of modifier inside your while loop that will change whatever condition you're checking, so that you're never stuck in a infinite loop. And then I can run that. Yeah, and then you got 10 through 0, just like that. And then with arrays, this was how you guys showed you we can modify different elements of an array. We went to an example on that a little bit further down. But 0 obviously is the 0th index, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then if I were to create other values, then we get 4th index there, 5th index, so on. So I'll keep reiterating this. So if I were to just print out, so this is how I can get the length of an array. I get 6 because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But then again, remember the last index of my array will always be the length minus 1. So if I wanted to, I'll just print it out. Let's say my array is like really long and I don't really want to count out every single index. Or I don't want to say like I want to count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The way that I know what the last index will be is I can just say array of the length minus 1. So this will basically just take me to the last element, and I'll make this like 123 so it's a little bit clear. And when I run that, it will print out 123 because array length minus 1 is the index of the last value in the array. Yeah. So then now this is a way that we can print out each individual element in using a for loop with all these different conditions. So when I ran that, oh yeah. So here I was demonstrating it before when I was running it, but I'm getting an index out of bounds because this is a less than or equal to. So you always want to make sure that when you're looping through each individual index in your array, that you go up until that length. Otherwise, it will include that length because that will be like index 11 for an array length of 11. But remember, the last index is the array length minus 1, which would be 10. So then now if I were to run it again, then it'll individually print out each element like that. Yeah, then we went through for each loop. So we have an array like this of strings of different cars. Then I want to print out each individual car. So the string cars is just a temporary string that I named. So remember, this can be anything that you want. And then it represents each individual value in that total array's car. And then the first time it'll be Volvo, second time BMW. Oops, if I were to run it, individually get each of those. So for each loops are actually pretty nice to use, as I kind of demonstrated here as well, using the arguments. And then I showed the for each loop one more time. So we'll stop with that for now. But now here, this was a pretty good example. So we created an array of 10 different elements. So this is creating an array that only will contain 10 elements. And if I were to try to access something outside of those 10 elements, Java will throw me an error. So it will only specifically be 10 elements. And then it will print out, I'll initially print it out and it will give me just an array of all zeros. And then I'm using this counter variable basically to manipulate each value in my array. So the first time it will be at 10 and I'll increment it by 10 as I go through each individual element. So as we demonstrated that, we got zeros and then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way to 100. The equivalent of a float in Java is, there is floats in Java also, but doubles are another example. Yeah, so this was a pretty good example, yeah, using counters and incrementing them to do different elements in the array. And then here I showed two different ways that Java can find, like in this case, find the max of different elements in my array. I don't know if you guys recall, a couple classes ago, we went through math.max of, for example, like 5 and 10. So if you guys were to actually go to the math class and the Java documentation, find whatever code they wrote for that, it would just look something simple like for example, So this would represent A, this would represent B. Then it would basically be like, if A is greater than B, like return A, otherwise return B. We'll get into more about returning and all that soon, but that's just like simple ways. So this is like, for example, if you were to create a max shoe size method, this would be the code that you would write, and then you would want to return whatever your max size is. But we'll get into the functions a little bit more later. But so now here we have shoe size, and then I created a variable to represent my length. So sometimes it's kind of nice to just make sure that in case your array gets modified or you remove some values or add more values on, you always have like a set length on the total length of your array. And then I created a temporary variable to represent whatever my max size will be. And then I went through this entire array and checked whether that value, the current value that I'm at in my array, is greater than the max size. And then if it is, then I assign max size. So remember, we went through each iteration like this. So the first time it was 8.5, so max size got changed. Next time it was 12, which is greater than the current value 8.5, so it got changed again. Then the second 2 times it didn't, and the third time it did. So these are, yeah, just different iterations. And then obviously I used a for each loop. As you can see, it looks like actually like a lot less code through my for loop. But the code inside is obviously the same. So yeah, so these are 2 different, so I don't get how 0, okay. So there's a question about the max size, why I'm assigning this to 0. So the reason that I'm assigning this to 0 is because based on my array, I already know that every single value in my array is greater than 0, because no one can have a shoe size of 0, right? Actually, I'm not sure about toddlers or anything, but yeah, so let's just assume no one has a shoe size of 0. But so then we know that we're going to check through and see if this is greater, so that the first time it executes, obviously whatever value is there is going to be the new max size. And then I'm going through the rest of my values to basically determine whether I have another value greater. This can also just, like, if I wanted to be safe, I can make this like negative, like 1,000,000 or something, in case I have some negative shoe values or whatever. But yeah. And then, for example, if I wanted to change this to like a minimum size, I want to find the smallest size in my array with this, then I can assign this to like a really big value. I'll just keep it, what is this, 1,000,000? Yeah, 1,000,000. And then if my shoe size is less than my min size, then I will assign that, and then I can print that out. And you see I get 8.5 and then 13 for the max. So 13 is getting printed from here when I'm finding the max, and then the minimum is getting printed from here. So I guess, yeah, this can be kind of confusing why I'm using these values of a million or 0. But basically, whenever you're trying to find like the minimum of a total number of values, then you want to use like a very large number, so that it's basically guaranteed that you'll find a number smaller than it, even on the first iteration. And then when I'm trying to find the maximum size, I want to find like a small value, so that when I'm going through each value in my for loop, that I'm basically guaranteed, even on the first iteration, that will be greater than my max size variable. If you have more questions about that, you can ask me after class. But yeah, then I quickly explained. So we'll get into student and student tester next week, this specific code that we're going to put into it.
Please go back to the class 5.java.
Yeah, I'll quickly explain this, and then I'll go back to that. So then again, public is everything that can be accessed outside of the class or inside of the class. Static, static is a confusing term. It's basically, it's like a class related method, meaning that this method can only be modified and accessed within the class, or not accessed, but can be, or actually, yeah. Sorry. So basically, this method can only be accessed within the class. So if I were to create like a static integer variable like number, and I say that is equal to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then this value cannot really be changed unless I really change it inside this class. So no one who's accessing my student object can change this number outside the class. But if I were to just create an integer like that, then I can change this wherever I want. And then void, we'll get into more next week, is basically returning, it doesn't return any value. Main is how Java wants you to define your class. And then these strings, string bracket bracket args is basically the different arguments that I can specify. then yeah, so then if I were to run this, I can do, these are the arguments, and then it prints out all the different arguments individually like that. So we'll get more using arguments in the future. But I kind of just wanted to explain what each of these mean. And obviously class, this other keyword that you guys see, class is just how you can create a class to create different main functions or methods or variables or whatever. Yeah, so it's already 6:02. So if you guys need to leave, the recording will be posted along with the code. The code will be posted on GitHub from today. But yeah, so thanks for coming. If you have any questions, I'll be here after class.
Excuse me, I was just wondering if you could go back to the class 5 file.
Oh yeah, sorry. Here.
Yes. So there was a question I had about the double max shoe code. So when you're saying double max shoe equals 0.0, and then you're saying for double size is shoe size, what are we implying with that?
So this is the for each loop example, similar to what we did up here with cars. So remember I said I created a string A that will, each time I go through my for loop, it will represent individual values.
What does that even mean?
Sorry, what? Oh, okay. But yeah, so there's double size. So the first time that I execute, I'll do similarly quickly about what I did here. So the first time, size is equal to 8.5, and then it does all the checks. And then the second time, size is equal to 12. So basically this size value will just represent whatever value in the iteration I'm at. So the first time is 8.5, second time is 12, which is the same thing that we did here. So then first time A is equal to Volvo, second time A is equal to BMW, and so on. So this is just how you can access easily like individual values.
So basically when you're saying max shoe equals size, it will take the latest iteration if it fulfills the conditions.
So like if I'm on, so yeah, in this case, the first time, since size is 8.5, and since size is greater than max shoe, now max shoe is equal to 8.5 after that iteration of the for loop is executed. Then now the second time it's the same thing. I see that size, my new value of size is 12 because it's the second time in my for loop. And then I see that size is greater than max shoe. So now max shoe will be 12.
Okay, because I was confused there because it said like for the first one, it said that the min size was equal to shoe size with the index of I. But in this one, we didn't have that index.
Yeah, so and this is the way that you don't need to worry about all those indexes and everything. Just go through each individual.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it seems like a lot of people are having errors with running this. So I'm just going to quickly demonstrate. So if you get into Sublime, so I'll save all these files really quickly. So if you guys open up Sublime for the first time, you'll get a screen like this for anyone who wants to see it. And then I save it, then I can find whatever folder. So in this case, I want to put it in class 5. And let's see, I save this to, for now, I'm just going to do test.java. So since I named it test.java, you want to say public class test. So that ensures that. And then I want to make sure that I have public static void main so that Java doesn't get mad at me for not having a main method. So remember, I can do all that. And then now, if I open up terminal, then I can see where I am. So I'm trying to find that class 5, right? So I know the class 5 is not here. So I know where it is. It's in my desktop. Then I can look again. And then I see, where is it? Class 5 is right here. So that I can go to class 5 like that. And then I have all my files here. And then now if I want to run this test.java, do it quickly. And I can do Java, test.java, and then it prints. So if you guys are having trouble with running, then that's just like the simple way to do it. Like just make sure if you follow each one of those steps, you should not have a problem with running your file.
But then it keeps saying that could not find or load main class and then the file name.
Could not, could you send me like a screenshot of that error? or at least copy and paste it into the chat so I can kind of see. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah,
the
I
name
can-
of the class needs to match the name of the file.
Okay, I can post that in the Slack later on.
Yeah. Hi, Ashri, you have a question?
Yes, when I run my code, it says error class hello.java file name couldn't be located.
Yeah, so that could be the case. So you see here, so I'm running this test.java, right? So since I'm in the folder that contains my test.java file, as you can see on my screen, let's say I wasn't in that folder.
Error could not find or load main class test.java, and I'm in the correct directory.
You're in the
Absolutely,
correct
yeah.
directory.
Yeah.
And you're running Java like this.
Yeah, what I typed is java space test.java.
Okay, yeah. So the only problems I can really think of off the top of my head is, since you say you're in the correct directory, so that should be fine. Verify your class name and file name are the same, and then verify that Java is downloaded. Have you been able to run it in the past?
No.
Okay, yeah. So just verify Java is downloaded. So the tutorial for that.
Yeah, I
is-
downloaded Java.
Okay. So yeah, if you're still unable to, just check out that tutorial again. Follow those steps, and if that still doesn't work, just message me on Slack with your error, and I'll try to work through it with you.
Okay, thanks.
I was just wondering, could it have been a problem with the command prompt?
I can't really think of any problems on command prompt. If
Because
you
it
Google the
looks,
error, people might have some. If you just Google whatever, for example, sorry,
It works perfectly for Python because I have that downloaded
Yeah,
as
it
well. It
works
just doesn't
perfectly
work for
for
Java.
What? Sorry, what?
It works perfectly for Python.
Yeah, so it could be a problem with like the Java download or whatever.
But
Are you on Windows?
the Java application, the same code works.
Are you on Windows or are you on Mac?
Windows.
Windows.
Are you on Windows as well?
Mhm.
Pradyum?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So yeah, it could be a problem with Windows. I'll look look more into like how to run Java on Windows through command line after class, and if you guys are still having a lot of problems, just message me on Slack, and then I can send you some like links or something that will be good reference.
Of course. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry, what?
What is the Slack link? Can you send it in the chat?
Yeah. Actually, you should be able to access to join Slack through that tiny URL. Let me just verify that link's there. Oh yeah. So I sent it to the chat, so you should be able to join Slack through that. Okay. Any last questions about anything with Java, or today's class or anything, or homework? Okay. Thanks for coming today. I'll see you guys next week.